The very air within the offices of Vance Sons, private equity, was steeped in the aroma of ambition and aged currency. It was a sensory signature of Elias Vance, the firm's octogenarian patriarch, whose presence, even when absent, dominated the space. His mahogany-paneled domain, overlooking the shimmering skyline of the financial district, had been the forge for his 85 years of ruthless efficiency. Elias was the architect of his empire, a man who believed sentiment was the Achilles heel of any successful venture. Now, however, the architect was crumbling, and the meticulously constructed empire was showing fissures. The designated heir was Eleanor Vance, Elias's granddaughter. At 35, Eleanor was the embodiment of the corporate ideal, sharply tailored, relentlessly driven, and possessing a gaze as unyielding as polished steel. She held the mandatory degrees from the most prestigious institutions, including the London School of Economics, and had spent her entire adult life serving her grandfather's doctrine. She had sacrificed every semblance of personal life, relationships, hobbies, downtime, in exchange for the professional validation and the promised crown, the CEO title. It was not just an ambition. She viewed it as her destiny and a deeply ingrained duty to the Vance name. Yet, invisible to the board, the financial press, and even the family, was the true operator, Clara Thorne. Clara, 58, was the firm's quiet executive assistant, Elias's shadow for the last 2 decades. She was the ghost in the machine, utterly meticulous, flawlessly silent, and entirely indispensable. Her attire was invariably practical and elegant, designed to blend into the background, muted colors, simple silhouettes, and silver hair pulled into a severe, unshakable knot. Clara's authority stemmed not from any fancy title or blood relation, but from an unparalleled, comprehensive knowledge of every operational detail, every coded transaction, and every uncomfortable truth hidden beneath the firm's polished veneer. She knew precisely where every skeleton was buried and which key unlocked which vault. The initial tremors of the coming upheaval began not in the granite canyons of the financial district, but within Elias's sprawling Connecticut estate, a fortress of wealth and isolation. The moment of truth arrived 6 weeks before the scheduled succession announcement. Eleanor was pacing the private suite, her expensive silk dress rustling impatiently across the thick, sound-dampening Persian rug. Her voice, usually measured, held a sharp, frustrated edge. "Clara, I need the Q3 projections signed off by him today. I am meeting with the acquisition team from Bristol in the morning, and without his final approval on the capital allocation, the entire multi-million-dollar deal is dead." Clara stood sentinel-like by a Renaissance-era fireplace, her attention focused on organizing a stack of Elias's recent medical records with an unnerving, almost ritualistic precision. "Mr. Vance has had a difficult morning, Eleanor. Dr. Chen advises absolute rest and a specific medication regime. He signed nothing, nor did he review any documentation." "Absolute rest? He's practically a vegetable now." Eleanor scoffed, her voice rising. "He hasn't made a single coherent decision in a month, yet he still insists on clinging to the formality of the final signature. It's bureaucratic nonsense orchestrated by you." Clara turned, her face a serene mask of polite neutrality, a look she had perfected to deflect decades of Vance family fury. "Mr. Vance is simply following procedure, Eleanor, as he has established for 40 years. He trusts procedure above all else." "He trusts you, Clara, far more than he trusts his own blood," Eleanor countered, her voice dropping into a cutting accusation. "Be honest. If you could forge his signature and get this deal through, you would. After all, you're the one who actually runs this entire operation, not him." Clara merely raised a thin, perfectly arched eyebrow. "My duties are precisely limited to managing Mr. Vance's affairs and maintaining his established protocols. Nothing more." The underlying tension between the two women was a low, constant electric hum. Eleanor desperately needed the CEO title to solidify her standing and validate her life's work, but the final, critical step, Elias's actual endorsement and signature on these crucial documents, was agonizingly stalled by his rapid decline and Clara's unyielding gatekeeping. This forced delay was costing Eleanor political capital on the board and putting the entire Bristol acquisition in jeopardy. The shadow of Vivian. A week bled into 2. Elias's health deteriorated rapidly, necessitating an emergency admission to the hospital's secured VIP wing. The board, sensing the end, moved the critical succession meeting up. Eleanor's mandate was clear. She had to demonstrate immediate, absolute control to secure the vote. Her first move was to try and neutralize the perceived threat, Clara. She confronted Clara in the opulent main library of the Vance Sons office. They were surrounded by floor-to-ceiling shelves housing leather-bound volumes of financial history, a history that, unbeknownst to Eleanor, was largely fabricated. Clara, Eleanor stated, her posture rigid. Effective immediately, all of Elias's personal files, both physical and digital, every record, every ledger, every personal key, are to be transferred to my office. We need to prepare the corporate filing for the inevitable succession. You will be assisting me directly now. Clara did not flinch. She simply adjusted her rimless spectacles with a slow, deliberate movement. I understand the urgency you perceive, Eleanor. However, there is a very strict protocol for the transfer of confidential records. Mr. Vance holds the only physical key to his primary vault here, and I am merely a secondary custodian for specific files which, incidentally, are not relevant to the operational requirements of the Bristol acquisition. Don't be deliberately obtuse. Eleanor spat out, losing her usual cool. Give me everything. The trust documents, the offshore accounts, the private family holdings, the entire lot. He is literally on life support, Clara. The firm needs to know the true extent of his holdings to maintain stability and reassure our investors. His private records are not the firm's records, Eleanor. That is a crucial distinction Mr. Vance has always maintained, and one he paid me handsomely to enforce. And I must remind you, you are not yet the CEO, and therefore, legally, not the executor of his private affairs. Eleanor leaned in close, her designer perfume clashing with the old leather scent of the library, her voice dropping to a dangerous, conspiratorial whisper. I know you've been paid handsomely over the years, Clara, more than anyone else in this firm, probably. I know you're sitting on enough information to sink half the board if you wanted to. Do not, I repeat, do not make me view you as an impediment to the future of this firm. We both want the same thing, the legacy of Vance and Sons to continue. Help me make this transition seamless. Clara finally looked directly into Eleanor's eyes, a rare, unnerving event for the fiercely private assistant. Seamlessness, as she said, her voice softer and lower than usual, almost a whisper herself, requires honesty. And honesty, Eleanor, has been scarce around here for decades. That night, in the profound silence of the empty Vance and Sons headquarters, Clara remained in Elias's opulent office. After ensuring the surveillance tapes in the corridor were on a loop, a trick she'd learned years ago, Clara performed a series of movements that revealed a hidden drawer in the mahogany desk. It was a pressure and magnetism mechanism, known only to Elias and herself. From the drawer, she retrieved a single, thick, red dossier labeled, The True History of Vance. This dossier held the key to the entire empire, a secret kept for nearly 50 years. The firm's official history claimed Elias Vance was the brilliant, solitary founder. The truth, however, was that the firm had been started by his deceased older sister, Vivian Vance, an economic and strategic genius whose tragic, sudden death in 1975 ruled an accident, was always whispered among the family's inner circle to be something darker, something suspicious. Vivian had left behind a detailed, legally binding contingency will, kept hidden by Elias, which stipulated a profound clause: if any of her direct descendants, meaning Elias's lineage, were ever found to be unfit to run the company due to ethical or criminal failings, the entire estate was to be immediately removed from the family's control and placed in the hands of a trusted, non-family guardian until the next generation of Vance children came of age. And Clara knew exactly who the most competent and ethically sound non-family guardian would be. She had been preparing for this day since she discovered Vivian's original papers 15 years ago. The gathering storm. The following day, Clara took the dossier, placed it in a secure, fireproof briefcase, and went to see Dr. Chen, Elias's primary physician. Dr. Chen, a man of quiet integrity, was not just Elias's doctor. He had also witnessed and notarized Elias's final instructions only days earlier, aware of the gravity of the situation. Clara ensured Dr. Chen had secure, digital backups of Vivian's will and the supporting evidence. Meanwhile, Eleanor was facing immediate pressure from the board. Mr. Sterling, the second-largest shareholder, had begun openly questioning her ability to close the Bristol deal without Elias's signature. Eleanor, as Sterling drawled during a tense preparatory meeting, "We need capital flow. If you can't deliver the signing authority, your assumption of the title means nothing. You need to pull a rabbit out of the hat." Eleanor, already sweating, attempted to assert her authority. "I am securing the necessary documentation. There are internal audits to finalize before the final sign-off can be obtained." The audits were finalized 3 weeks ago. Sterling shot back, pulling out a printout stamped with Elias's signature. "Clara brought these to me herself. I need the acquisition completed, or the board will be forced to reconsider the interim leadership structure." Eleanor stared at the document. Clara had lied to her. Not only was the audit finalized, but Clara had already used Elias's signature stamp to communicate with the board, consolidating her own subtle power base while starving Eleanor of the authority she craved. The realization hit Eleanor with the force of a physical blow. Clara had not just been a passive assistant. She had been meticulously charting Eleanor's moves, controlling the flow of information, and maintaining a secret, powerful parallel authority for years. Eleanor's paranoia kicked in. She immediately ordered an internal IT audit of Clara's entire computer system and digital archives. The IT department, loyal to Eleanor, spent 12 frantic hours attempting to access Clara's hidden files. They came up empty. Clara had utilized bespoke, military-grade encryption on all her personal and Elias-related drives, a system she had developed herself using knowledge gleaned from an obscure software development firm Vance Sons had once acquired and then shut down. The re-ghost in the machine was unhackable. Eleanor's frantic attempt to wrest control only accelerated her inevitable downfall. Her desperate actions, combined with the lack of a clear signature, made her look incompetent and unstable to the skeptical board members. The boardroom showdown. The emergency board meeting convened 3 days later in the large, austere boardroom. The room was chillingly cold, dominated by a long slab of polished marble. Eleanor, despite her inner turmoil, walked in projecting an image of unassailable confidence, taking her designated place at the head of the long table. Clara, as always, sat quietly to the side, maintaining the appearance of a loyal servant taking notes. Eleanor began her speech, her voice resonant and controlled. "Gentlemen, as you all know, my grandfather's severe health necessitates an immediate and swift transfer of power. To have prepared for this moment my entire life. I have secured the crucial Bristol deal, finalized all due diligence, and I am prepared to sign the official documents immediately after this vote." "Actually, Eleanor," interrupted Mr. Thompson, the company's ancient legal counsel and the last remaining member from Vivian's era. His voice was fragile. The Bristol deal requires Elias's physical signature, which we still do not possess. The transfer is stalled on two critical points: the health mandate stipulated in the Founder's Charter and the succession plan itself. Eleanor forced a cold, patronizing smile. I'm sure we can find a simple legal workaround. A temporary mandate, perhaps an affidavit signed by the board to temporarily grant me full authority. There is no workaround for a Founder's Charter. A clear, new voice cut across the room. It was Clara. Every head at the table snapped towards her, utterly surprised by her unprecedented interruption. I apologize for speaking out of turn, Eleanor, Clara said, standing up slowly. She was holding the thick, ominous red dossier close to her chest. But I believe the governing charter is now fully activated, rendering your proposed affidavit null and void. Eleanor's composure finally shattered. Her eyes narrowed to venomous slits. Clara, you are not a board member, nor are you a legal counsel. Sit down immediately. This discussion is not your affair. It is entirely my affair, Clara stated, her voice quiet but possessing an absolute, chilling authority that momentarily silenced the room. She walked deliberately to the center of the table, placing the red dossier directly in front of Eleanor. For 2 full decades, I have managed every document, every financial detail, and every profound secret of this family and this company. And it is my final, unavoidable duty to present a piece of legal documentation that Elias, at great personal risk, had me safeguard for this specific, apocalyptic moment. She laid the dossier on the marble table. This is the original will of Vivian Vance, the true, verifiable founder of this company, dated 1975. The room erupted into a deafening clamor of disbelief and outrage. Elias had always been publicly hailed as the singular founder. This is completely ridiculous. It's a blatant forgery. Eleanor screamed, her face mottled with panic and fury. Security! Get this woman out of here. It is, regrettably, not a forgery, a pale Mr. Thompson confirmed, his hand trembling as he examined the aged, yellowing paper and the intricate, forgotten seals. The signatures are valid. I recognize the notary seal and the specific legal paper stock from that era. Clara opened the dossier to a heavily underlined, specific page. Vivian Vance established the clause. In the event of Elias's incapacity or death, and should his direct successor be deemed incapable of upholding the moral and ethical standard upon which Vance was founded, a temporary, non-family guardian is to be appointed with full executive power until the next generation reaches the age of 30. Eleanor let out a single, hysterical laugh. And who, in this room, is going to deem me incapable? The documents detailing the $20 million embezzlement from the employee pension fund over the last 4 years might, Clara stated flatly, the words falling like blocks of ice. She slid a stack of digital printouts, meticulously coded bank statements and internal transfer requests, across the table. These are the coded transactions, precisely authorized under your internal ID, Eleanor, carefully masked by routing them through Elias's primary account, an account you thought only you had access to. The blood instantly drained from Eleanor's face, leaving her ghost white. She had been taking money slowly, methodically, convinced she was entitled to the cash and far too clever to ever be detected. She thought her careful coding would fool any internal audit. You're lying. He signed those. Elias's signature, Clara interrupted, her voice gaining steel, has been a digital stamp on my desk for 3 years. He has not physically signed anything but his medical release forms since early 2022. I alone controlled the stamp, as per his directive to expedite low-level transfers. These coded transactions were yours alone, Eleanor, designed to look like routine transfers, and they represent a profound violation of the fiduciary trust set forth in the original charter. The board members, immediately calculating their own legal liability and the financial abyss opening beneath the firm, stared in stunned silence. They looked from Clara's stoic, undeniable evidence to Eleanor's terrified, collapsing facade. The charter requires a guardian to be chosen by Elias in a letter of final instruction, Mr. Thompson whispered, clutching the arm of his chair. Is there such a letter, Clara? Clara reached into the inner pocket of her jacket, a gesture that finally confirmed she had been planning this moment for years. She produced a single, sealed envelope, crisp and officially notarized. His final directive, she said. Dated just 4 days ago, signed, witnessed, and notarized by Dr. Chen and a secondary legal witness. Eleanor lunged across the table, grabbing the envelope in a last, desperate act. It's mine. It must name me. He wouldn't. Before she could tear it open, 2 burly security guards, prepositioned outside the room by Clara's earlier, silent instruction, entered the room and immediately escorted a screaming, defeated Eleanor out of the boardroom. The corporate fraud documentation Clara had just presented required immediate and forceful action. Clara calmly walked to the center of the table, broke the seal on the envelope, and handed the document to Mr. Thompson. He read the single, stark page aloud, his voice cracking with a mixture of fear and absolute disbelief. To the board of Vance and Sons. Due to my current physical state, and the shocking lack of ethical and financial integrity demonstrated by my current successor, Eleanor Vance, I hereby immediately activate the Vivian Vance Contingency Clause, 1975. I appoint Clara Thorne as the sole, temporary executive guardian of Vance and Sons, with full CEO powers, until my great-grandson, Julian, reaches the age of 30. Clara Thorne has served this family and this firm with more honor, competence, and unshakable loyalty than anyone of my own blood. Her profound knowledge of Vivian's original vision and the complex structure I have built is the only thing that can save the company from the ethical and legal disaster I have shamefully allowed to unfold. Signed, Elias Vance, founder. The New Dawn. The room was utterly silent. Clara Thorne, the quiet assistant who had served tea and organized schedules for 2 decades, had not only spectacularly exposed the entitled, but had been personally handpicked by the founder himself to save the entire company from implosion. Clara took her seat at the head of the table. The silence continued, but it had shifted from the chaos of shock to the profound stillness of respect and undeniable fear. Gentlemen, Clara said, her voice now emanating a firm, utterly assured authority that chilled the room. The transition is complete. I will operate under the Guardian mandate for the foreseeable future. My first act will be to commission a full, external ethical and financial audit of every single transaction for the last 5 years. We will immediately restore the misappropriated pension fund and report the fraud committed by Eleanor Vance to the proper authorities. Effective immediately, Vance and Sons will no longer be defined by deception and self-interest. Her absolute, quiet control was the immediate, perfect antidote to the ethical and managerial chaos Elias had allowed to fester. The board, terrified of being potentially implicated in any lingering fraud, quickly and unanimously fell into line. Over the next few months, Clara systematically and efficiently dismantled the old, corrupt guard of Vance and Sons. Eleanor was successfully prosecuted for financial fraud, facing complete ruin and disgrace. Clara moved the company's core focus from aggressive, often dubious, and leveraged acquisitions to stable, long-term, ethical investment, a return to the principles that Vivian Vance had originally intended. Clara did not change her modest, practical attire or her reserved manner. But now, when she walked into any room, everyone noticed. She was the most powerful individual in the building, yet she had achieved it not through blood, not through greed, or sheer inheritance, but through 2 decades of quiet, unshakable diligence and a profound, unwavering integrity. On a cold, late November afternoon, Elias Vance passed away. Clara was the only person with him in his final moments. He was lucid for a brief, fleeting moment, his eyes finding hers. "Clara," he whispered, his grip surprisingly strong on her hand. "You knew everything. The moment I hired you, I knew you were the only one who truly understood Vivian's vision. You are, or the real Vance." Clara simply held his hand until his breathing finally ceased. "No, Elias," as she whispered to the empty room. "I am Clara Thorne. And integrity is a legacy that must be written, not simply inherited." She had not inherited the Vance name or the Vance fortune, but she had definitively earned the right to steer the legacy. The gilded cage of the Vance family was decisively broken, and the true, ethical history of the firm was finally being written by the woman they all condescendingly thought was a just the help. The future of Vance and Sons was no longer built on entitled blood and corrupt lies, but on a foundation of quiet, earned trust and undeniable power.